run the program at CSIS on youth prosperity and security. It's a relatively new program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and it's in partnership with the International Youth Foundation in Baltimore, Maryland. And the goal of our program is to really basically bring the views and perspectives of young people from around the world into the policy and security dialogues that are happening here in Washington, D.C. A lot of times the issues around youth, whether it's violent extremism, whether it's lack of employment, whether it's democracy, we often look at the youth bulge as the problem, as the thing to be afraid of, and how are we going to manage, particularly young Muslims. That tends to be our lens. My job is to try to flip that on its head and really bring forward voices like Ayaz's that, in fact, the solutions to a lot of the challenges that we have, whether they be in economic opportunity or in civic participation or in peace and security, that young people who live in these countries actually are bringing forward the solutions to those problems, not in the future. They're not making recommendations for some time far ahead. They're actually working in communities right now to build tolerance, to build understanding, to build peace and security for their countries. And we would really like to see our U.S. policymakers engaging with these young people, learning from them, and ideally actually supporting their work. Ayaz and I have spent the last couple of days on Capitol Hill and at the State Department, and I think I have to say it's been rather depressing to see that there just isn't a lot of interest. There isn't a lot of direct support for young people in the region that are actually doing the work for a whole variety of reasons that you know, whether it's the financing problems, whether it's we don't have the staff on the ground in order to give small grants. You can name 100 reasons. And yet, these are the people who are doing the work that is highly, highly effective in providing peace and stability. So I'm going to introduce Ayaz, and he'll tell you a little bit about his project and his organization, and then we're going to just have a conversation, I think, and give you some insights also into what we've experienced over these last few days in DC, and then have you join in the conversation and ask. It's an opportunity to, which I think unfortunately is a rare one for a lot of us in DC, but to hear from somebody who is actually living there, who has not left Iraq, but is staying there despite a lot of odds, to try to give his generation some kind of a future. So Ayaz Shalal Hassan is a Laureate International Global Youth Fellow, which is a project that supports young social entrepreneurs around the world. And every year, Laureate picks 15 young people and brings them together to do some intensive workshops and gives them some funding to really take their social enterprises forward. And this project is in partnership with the International Youth Foundation, which runs the Youth Action Net. So Ayaz was one of the 15 fellows who was here in DC last October, and I just felt I had to bring him back to really have some conversations with different people in Washington, D.C. So welcome again.
Thank you.
This is his last gig in D.C., and then he's off to New York and Miami. But so tell everybody about Rahsan, and then we can talk about how you found your way into this work.
Yeah. I would like to thank you all to come, to take the time to come to listen to me. And I would like to thank her specifically to leave her kids home and be with me for the whole week. Rahsan is an organization that was established in 2004. And I joined Rahsan almost a year and a half ago. And Rahsan is an organization it's a local NGO that works for defending women's rights basically in Kurdistan area of Iraq. We have done several projects for women, for refugee women, Syrian refugee women, and for Kurdish local women, and for Arabs as well, Arabs and Yazidis, the IDPs that come from the rest of Iraq to Suleimania.
So tell everyone how you first got started in this work, that you weren't actually from Iraq originally.
Yeah.
And why does a young man like you decide to dedicate his life to women's rights, which is not particularly, socially, it's not high status from a social perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm originally Syrian. My dad and mom from Syria. I was born in Syria, but we moved to Iraq after my dad was threatened to be killed from al-Assad government. So we moved to Iraq, and then my dad was threatened again in Iraq, so they moved to Turkey, but I stayed in Iraq to work. How I got involved in this kind of issues, I grew up in a very liberal family, and they gave me the total freedom of making my own decisions and choosing my own path. I was as a kid, I was a very beautiful kid. So people would always call me the special kid because I didn't look like my brother or other kids in the family. So that gave me a higher status than other kids and than my peers. And because of that, I started reading, actually, because I realized that for being a leader, I have to be smart. Beauty is not enough. I have to be smart as well. Yeah. So I started reading, and my elder sister, who I call my hero, she introduced me to an Egyptian feminist writer. Her name is Nawal Saadawi. And Nawal Saadawi, who I call the prophet, she changed my life and the way I look at the world. She opened my mind, and through Nawal Saadawi, I was encouraged to read philosophy, to read science, to read literature, to actually start researching myself, the world around me. And Nawal Saadawi had a big effect on shaping my personality today, and she encouraged me through her writings to be a feminist and to call myself a feminist man. And also my parents were very supportive, and they gave me the total freedom to, as I said, to choose the path I want. And also by realizing my female and male rule in my family, in my biggest family and my small family as well. I realized that my dad has opportunities, and my dad has certain privilege that my mom doesn't. And even though I believed and I was seeing that my mom is very smart, so that encouraged me actually to even think more about this. Yeah, so basically that's how I got involved. And I'm 23 now. When I was 18, I started volunteering in women's rights organization, and I was very curious about working for women, and I was sticking my nose in everything, in the director's job, in the accounting job, in the project manager's job. So I started learning, actually, and after that I started my own initiatives, my own projects.
So tell us about the project that you started and you ran.
In Iraq.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you said in Iran.
In Iraq.
Oh, okay.
That you ran.
Ran.
Not I ran.
Okay.
But that you ran.
Yeah. I was like, no, I haven't started anything in Iran. Maybe in the future.
Yeah, maybe in the future.
The first and the biggest project I started was for refugee women, refugees who came to Suleimania city from Syria, and the host community, the local women as well. We had three basic parts of this project. The first part was we targeted 2,000 women, and we gave them awareness sessions about their legal rights in Iraq, about how their social life would look like, family protection issues, health issues, and you have specialists. And I was the project manager and the founder of the initiative. I was involved in all the seminars we gave, and the second part of the project is we distributed 2,000 hygiene and dignity kits to women. each hygiene kit included sanitation and health and the products that a woman need, a refugee woman need, in order to stay healthy. And the third part of the project, which was the biggest part, is we collected all the different groups in Suleimania. In Suleimania, it's a very diverse society. We have Iraqi Arabs, Kurds, Iraqi Kurds, we have Yazidis, we have Muslims, we have Syrian Arabs, and we have Syrian Kurds. So the project collected all of these women and men and youth from all of these groups in rooms like this, and we started building a relationship between these different groups. And I was telling Lisa that, Lisa is my coach, I was telling Lisa that it was amazing to see women learning each other's language in the room. Like, how would you say hello in your language? And how would you say, you know, these kind of questions. And we trained these people about, again, about their legal rights, about what connects them, what divides them, how can we develop their connectors, how can we get rid of their dividers. This was the first project I had. The second project, and well, not the second, the last project, and the most difficult project I call, was with Yazidis, pregnant women, the victims of ISIS. So Yazidis women who are pregnant from ISIS. We targeted 90 women, victims of ISIS. We provided them with health services. We took them to specialists. We also provided them with social support. We talked to their families in order to reestablish their relationship with their families after they lost all the connections with their families. And we also provided them psychological support because they are suffering from what they went through and they experienced.
So what do you think that youth, let's just say in Kurdistan, right? So not so much the rest of the Afghan, there is some stability. There is beginning to be some infrastructure. Why is it important that our country engage with the young people in Kurdistan? I mean, I know why, you know why, but just to articulate that out loud.
I think in order to create any change, any real change, or in order to develop, prosper any society, the main target should be youth, because youth are the future leaders. Youth have all the energy. And Iraqi youth in general, not only Kurds, they are suffering literally from what's going on in Iraq. Bad education, like very bad economics, and Iraq is listed among the most corrupted countries in the world, and violent society. So Iraqi youth they are like, I describe them as a white paper that any ideology that will come to Iraq will affect them. So in order to prevent greater problems than ISIS, I think U.S. Department and U.S. government and any other country, if they have the willingness or if they want to make change in Iraq, they should work with youth. Yes.
One of my observations in looking at current U.S. Programs to combat violent extremism and a lot of investment in counter-messaging, right? Where we're trying to put out an alternative narrative, find legitimate voices from these countries, but I'm puzzled as to why we will spend a lot of money on counter-messaging but not necessarily working directly with youth populations. I mean, have you experienced any of that counter-messaging work that we're doing in Iraq, and what is your opinion about that strategy?
I think counter-messaging can work in some areas and during a specific period of time, but we are reaching a point in Iraq that it's the red line. Like, you either have to be ISIS or you either have to hold guns to protect yourself. I'm not talking about Kurdistan. I'm talking about Iraq as a country. So I think it's more important now to actually support people, even if it's not me, support people, youth people, like even older than me or younger than me, to actually start working in this society in reality. And I've always told you, and I've always told my friends, change actually, if you want to create change in a society, it's better if the change will come from the people in the society themselves, not from an outsider. So you see what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
yeah. So involving citizens from the country that you want to make change in is very important, and doing that in reality and in everyday life.
I think it's much easier said than done, as we have been discovering in all of our conversations. There's so many reasons why that doesn't happen. Well, I have several more questions for you, but I want to open it up and make it a conversation. So please, if you would just stand up and tell us your full name and your question, that would be wonderful. Does anybody want to start? Yes, sir.
My name is John Herrera. Among other things, I oversee NDI's public opinion research in Iraq. One of the questions that I have, especially about the youth in Iraq, is, and with the gender issues, but beyond that, society as a whole, is it's a challenging situation, and the youth are struggling, and societal changes need to be made. But a lot of that also has to come from the political realm. What can the youth in Iraq do to start influencing the politics, to kind of start making the change within the machine, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, good question.
Great question, but very hard at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why we should pay you, right? To answer these
Exactly.
hard
I was telling
questions.
them that they are taking my intellectual properties, my
That's
ideas,
right.
without paying me anything.
You've been in the U.S. too many times.
Yeah. I would say to answer that question, I don't know if I have the full answer to that question, but I would say every youth can do something. For example, if you take me as an example, I am focusing on civil society, and somehow my organization is doing advocacy. So we are influencing actually the government and the public opinion. Youth in general, even if a young man or woman was a college student or a high school student, they still can make change in their societies. And and that change can come from different angles. Like, it doesn't have to go directly to the government. Any young woman or any young man can change something in his own area or her own area. And by changing the society, by changing the mindsets, that's how you can change the politicians as well, and the government as well. Because at the end, the government is elected by the people, and the government members are one of the people as well.
What's the voting age in Iraq? How old do you have to be to vote?
18.
18.
Yeah.
So half the population of Iraq is under 19 years old.
Yes.
Yeah? So that's a big cohort that every year begins to move into that voting age population. And at least in Kurdistan, are young people actually going out and voting? Are there, I mean, how is that structured, or are the elections fairly fixed and it's not, nobody wants to participate because it's a given outcome?
Actually, there is a very active participation in political life in general in Iraq among youth. You would see a young woman can tell you the whole governmental structure in Kurdistan and how it works, and who's corrupted, who's more corrupted, because everyone is corrupted.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's very active, and that's very interesting, and that's what we should be investing in, because everyone is interested, and it's the right time to start our investment before people will lose their energy and their interest.
Yeah, so more money for your programs, in other words. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Omar Ndawi, I'm director for Iraq at Griffin Partners, the advisory firm. Question about perhaps another aspect that concerns the youth in Iraq is reducing sectarian tension. Does your organization do anything in the area of reducing communal tensions, helping young Sunnis and young Shias and young Kurds find common ground? Do you have partnerships with organizations in other parts of Iraq, in the south and center? Do you work with, particularly Iraq's Sunni beleaguered community, and which is mostly displaced right now? I appreciate any thoughts on that. Thanks.
Yeah. Actually, Eric was kind enough to get the printouts. We should pass those around right now that describe some of these programs.
Yeah. We actually, we do that, and we strongly believe in that. And if you look at our organization, you will see Arabs working with us, Kurds. You will see Yazidis working with us. So we are like a small example of collecting different people from different sects and religion in Iraq. We do for example, the activity, the part of the first project I just talked about was about collecting people from different religion, from different backgrounds, different ethnicities together in Iraq in one room in order to encourage them to live peacefully with each other. And I've been telling my friends here and that we are aiming to start a project for youth, which is exactly what you said, what you just talked about. It's about bringing youth from all the parts of Iraq into Sulaymaniyah city or Erbil, and start a religious pluralism, like a sort of peace-building process with this youth, and we are waiting for fundings. Yeah.
Yeah, and that seems to be sort of the end to every conversation is we're waiting for funding.
Exactly.
Yeah, and to hear Obama on the news all day today, fighting ISIS is our top priority, Syria, Iraq, top priority, and it's just very frustrating that the resources don't seem to be following that rhetoric. Yeah, so other questions and thoughts? Yes, sir, in the front.
My name is Javier. I'm with George Washington University. I want to know about which are the main drivers that, according with your personal knowledge and according to your experience in Iraq, drive most of the young people, or that sector of the young people, to gather with religious extremism groups or with violent groups, or which are the main drivers, according to your experience, of radicalization in the Iraqi youth? I'm talking. I want to know sociological drivers. For example, I don't know, unemployment, lack of trust in institutions. Corruption. I don't know.
Yes.
You've already said a couple of them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, I would say it's a very complicated mixture of causes that will lead a young man to join ISIS, for example. And ISIS is not the only terroristic group in Iraq. We have a couple of others as well that are not very famous yet. I would say it's poverty, it's corruption, it's lack of education. It's as I said before, it's Iraqi people now are in a very sensitive situation, and any ideology, Iraqi youth I'm talking about, any ideology will affect them, any ideology will attract them. So if we have an ideology that encourages democracy and liberalism, it will affect people. If we have an ideology which is unfortunately it's the only ideology that exists now to promote terrorism, then it will affect people as well.
There's a whole generation of young people who have grown up with the war. That Ayaz was 11.
Yeah.
Many of your colleagues were younger than that, who are now coming of age in their teens and early 20s, with so many promises broken, and so much violence that they've witnessed, and family members killed, and very negative experiences with the military or with the security forces, and sort of layers and layers of that kind of injustice and poverty. I think to put ourselves in that position, and sort of ask ourselves, what would you do? Not to say that I would personally join a terrorist network, but if that if that's your only option, if that's what's offering you some livelihood, not to mention a free wife and, eternal bliss, it becomes a pretty not a complex decision. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so let me be more specific.
Yeah.
Would you say that religion is not the main driver of ISIS?
Let me just repeat the question for people listening online. Yeah, the question was, so can we say then that religion is not the main driver for ISIS?
Oh, I would say it's a driver, but it's not definitely the main driver. And I would draw a very big line between Islam and between ISIS. There is a huge difference between Islam and between ISIS, totally different ideologies. And Islam is being explained in a very different way among ISIS and among real Muslims. So they would use some verses, for example, from the Holy Book to encourage young people, encourage simple-minded people to join them. But it's definitely not the main one. It's definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do when we say Muslim millennials are the problem, right? When we define the problem, we've shut the conversation down already because we've said your religion and your age are fundamentally the problem and have shut out all of the other things that are actually probably more factors in it than others. So yes, you had a question?
Yes, Mike Gaines. I kind of want to go back a little bit, first off, to the comment about the U.S. government funding for programs like that. What are the best practices that have shown to work over time, particularly with large influxes of money? I was in the Iraq War, and they sent a lot of money over there, and I saw a lot of it get wasted. So that question one, what's the best practices? And two, I'm not a very smart guy, so I kind of break things down in polars or whatever. So your point about influence and youth with, hey, this white piece of paper, if we tell them this will stick, or if they tell them this will stick. It seems like liberalism, democracy, all those, lack of a better term, modern ideologies, they seem more complex, in my opinion, than something very easy, very basis, basically. It's, hey, do this, and, you'll get all these great things, versus, hey, you have to make all these decisions. Hopefully you make the right decisions. You have to educate yourself about, in other words, the easy seems like it'll stick a lot quicker than the complex, which is, liberalism, democracy, and the rest.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, two really good questions. So I've been working on this issue of best practices in development for 25 years, and I'm trying to reform U.S. foreign assistance. I mean, the best practices are so simple. It is truly mind-blowing that we don't do them, right? That our country doesn't just normally do this as practice, that we work in the opposite direction. It takes a lot of energy to do the opposite thing. So one, ask people what they want. Very, very basic. Almost never happens. Programs designed in Washington, D.C. at the State Department, right? Then we go to the community and we say, you probably did this in the PRTs. We're here to build you a school. We don't need a school.
We
right?
need a hospital first.
We need a hospital. We need, So number one, that. Number two, we need to be willing to give people long-term funding for locally based civil society organizations, right? And is there corruption? Yes, there's corruption. Yeah? But when you compare it to the amount of money that we put into our contracting, the contractors that do development, and think about how much of that money is wasted and how much of that sort of is filtered off in legalized forms of corruption, I would argue that even if we fund some organizations that are not spending the money in the best way, we would still get better results than what we've gotten over the last 50 years of the way we've been doing development, yeah? We should have more people on the ground in these countries so that we can really have an understanding of who is corrupt, who's not,
Exactly.
who's effective, who's not effective. I mean, I've spent time in 7 or 8 different countries around the world, and it doesn't take very long to figure out, at least in my sector, which has traditionally been working with women's organizations, you know, who is for real and who isn't for real. That's not an impossible thing to know. And again, you know, the hubris that and I'm an American citizen, so I can say this, but the hubris with which we go to other countries is a huge part of the problem, right? We need to have some humility and some empathy, and if we approach people in true partnership, we would most certainly get a lot farther than we do. So I don't think the best practices they're not mysterious. You don't really, I mean, you can study this. I mean, we have the data to prove these things as well, right? To compare the outcomes from a community-based, community-led development program versus an AID contractor coming in from the outside. We have the data, we have the evidence to show which one is more effective. But again, special interests get involved and it all becomes very complicated. But, you know, the truth is actually fairly simple. So I will let you answer the question about a second question, yeah.
I think it is very easy to be, to get a free wife, as you said, and it's more likable. It's just a shorter way to get a free wife and free food and a salary, just by destroying a house of someone else. If you are not a human enough, you can do that very easily. But my answer to your question would be education. So education will always help to prevent, to actually prevent youth of joining this kind of groups, and also to encourage them to think and to be educated. You know, so if an educated man I wouldn't imagine, and for example, one of my friends from the American university will join ISIS, or from the university across the street, to the Suleimania University, because they are educated people. And terrorist groups usually, they target low-income, not educated people. So education would be my answer.
I'm just sorry, I don't mean to pick on you, but do you want to offer any other suggestions on this topic? Because I know this is what this plural, sort of creating pluralistic societies, is something that you all work on.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the battle. At least that's what we see in the polling that we've been doing. That this intrinsic divisions. You know, one of the things, I don't know if this is adding to the conversation or not. You know, one of the things that is very common is everyone points to the political parties and saying, oh, they're the ones with the sectarian intentions. Mm-hmm. But if you look beneath the roots, it's really ingrained within society itself in terms of intermarriage questions, in terms of would you vote for someone from a different sect and things like that. So the work you're doing to try to bridge these divides, I think it does have to be based in society. And I think when people point to the political parties, I think that's an easy out for them.
Exactly.
It's really, you got to do it within society as well. I don't know if that helped or not with the conversation.
Yeah, so other questions? Is there anyone else before we come back? Okay, yes, sir.
Yeah, another concern that I have regarding the Iraqis, I mean, but this is something, I mean, it's not only Iraqi challenge, I think it's also Syria, Egypt. The role that social media is playing, I mean, the growing role of social media playing in the way these new technologies build the public opinion and manage to create, you know, like hegemonic messages in sometimes. I mean, I think it's obvious that radical groups are doing a very well job in this regard. I mean, they are engaging with their potential targets very easily. Do you think that there is any other interesting actor in Iraq that is able to engage with youth generations as effectively and as good as radical terrorists or radical groups are doing?
You're going to have to help me understand
Understand the question. So the question was, are there other groups in Iraq that are doing a good job in engaging young people through social media or through other means? The point was that, you know, the other actors, the terrorist actors, are very sophisticated in engaging youth on social media mechanisms. So is there anyone else who's, you know, presenting a different point of view that is as effective also?
Oh yeah, there are actually there are political parties who are bringing youth together. It's not it's still bad. They are bringing youth together to divide the society, but at least it's better than the terrorists. And there are actually UN agencies are doing many programs for Iraqi youth. They collect youth from different cities from Iraq, and they bring them together, and they create this kind of networks for youth. I am part of a network with UNFPA. They call it Y-Peer Network. And I have friends from Basra, from Baghdad, from all the cities, in the big cities and the small cities from different parts of Iraq. So there are several attempts to collect youth together. Yeah.
So you...
The grassroots efforts, though, with the protests, I mean, isn't this an area where it's largely youth-driven, at least that's my understanding? Isn't this an area where youth can kind of corral, even though it's not a formal setting, but they're expressing their outrage about being disenfranchised? I mean, couldn't this be part of a movement to start collecting and pushing youth to have some type of influence?
Yeah.
What is that, protest you said?
The public protests.
Oh, okay.
Can you repeat the question into the microphone just briefly? Because people who are watching online can't hear you.
I guess it was more a comment about, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be formal organizations that are mobilizing the youth, but the public protests that have been occurring, I think, are a good thing for Iraq's democracy. It's giving a voice to people who have been disenfranchised or feel that they are being, and a lot of that is the youth who are mobilizing, and a lot's through social media that they're coming around to do these public protests. And I think that if there's a way to corral this energy, if it's not even through a formal process, this could be a way to kind of get the youth engaged to push for changes within the government and society as a whole.
I would say yes and no, because I would say yes because yes, they are youth who are going to streets and who are asking for more rights and change in the society. But at the same time, whenever there is a protest in Suleimania, I would say, people know who's behind the protest. So there is a politician always. There is a political game that is behind the scenes. So I think this protesting in general is very healthy, but not in Suleimania or not in Iraq. Yeah.
So tell us about the time you spent living as a refugee. What was that like?
When we first left, I mean, our life in Syria was very good. My dad has a very good job. But after he was threatened because of his political views, we went to Iraq. We spent like 2 days until we arrived to Suleimania. And it was Saddam was still there when we left Syria. So it was very difficult. I mean, we went out from Syria because of Al-Ba'ath Party, because of Bashar al-Assad, and we went to Iraq because it was the only opportunity. We didn't have any other country welcoming us. So we went to Iraq for Saddam's mercy. And it was very difficult at the beginning because we didn't speak the language. My dad didn't have any job. So it was very difficult for us to go along with others, and we were receiving money from the rest of the family in Syria. So it was pretty difficult for me, and for me as a kid, it was even more difficult because I was the special kid, as I told you. So in Iraq, it was a totally different society, totally different thing for me. So I spent a couple of very, very difficult experiences with my peers in school. I was alone all the time. So yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah. And you had it relatively easy compared to what a lot of other refugees are dealing with.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
leaving Syria.
Oh, my God, yeah.
No, it's just not even a comparison. Yeah. And where are you going to go after this? We were joking about, so when are you going to run for office in Kurdistan? But seriously, where do you go after this? You're about to finish college in 2 months. I know you want to get a master's degree, but what's your long-term plan?
Hopefully after finishing my master's degree with Laureate, this is an indirect message to tell them that I need the master's degree scholarship now.
Not so subtle.
Yeah. After finishing my master's degrees, I imagine myself in future to be a world decision maker. That's what I'm trying to achieve in my life.
To be a what decision maker?
World decision maker.
World decision maker.
Yes. I want to have an international influence in the future.
At the UN or?
UN, World Bank, I don't know, maybe run for presidential election in the US.
Yeah, that's
the shortest way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't mean to burst your bubble. But, yeah. And why is it that you want to go that direction? I mean, given I understand your dad's background, but all the risks involved with that are substantial.
Oh, definitely. And there will be so much comparison and so much to deal with, so many difficulties. But I love challenges. I love hard things. And I believe I can make very positive change. Mm-hmm. And I'm already making positive change on a small scale. So why not on a bigger scale?
Now, if Bashar al-Assad is, booted out of Syria, miraculously, would you go back there? Or would you stay in Iraq?
No, I wouldn't go back to Syria because my parents might go back to Syria because that's where they lived. But I would stay in Iraq and make the change that I'm making.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, it's amazing that you're still committed after everything that's happened. So, we really salute you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what else would be helpful to you all? He's said it all. He's answered all of your questions.
My favorite color is white.
Well, I'll ask you the final question that I've asked you this along the last couple of days, but if you could sit down with President Obama, today, and I apologize that I couldn't get you that meeting.
It's okay, next time.
I did try.
But we agreed that you will manage it with President Clinton.
That's right. That might have a better shot at that. We'll see. But what would you? In all seriousness, what would you say to the U.S. president? Now, what would your best advice be?
I would say, instead of working with governments, with corrupts, you should start working with people. Because people will make the real change, not the governments.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming. And please stay around. We have plenty of time. So if you want to have more of an informal conversation with Ayaz, we can do that off the record. No video streaming involved. But thank you all for coming. Appreciate your being with us.
Thank you.